Okay, we're live. Hello, Costa. How are you?
Hey Johnson, very well, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me on Truth, Wisdom, Freedom Conversations. And I'm really excited to talk to you about gene keys. So just turn off the volume here. Hi, Doreen. Thanks for tuning in. While we wait for some people to join us here, just want to introduce Costa. And yeah, I connected with Costa, just through the digital connections of what our world is today, right? Through LinkedIn, and just he reached out, or I don't know who reached out, but I saw you um, somewhere on LinkedIn. I don't even know how, and and then there was this mention of gene keys, and I've heard of gene keys, and I'm always really intrigued and fascinated by different various conscious tools that people can use to know themselves in different ways. And so I know about gene keys through the human design system. And and then poof, I was thinking about that, and there you were, synchronicity. And then I actually had a little mini reading with Costa, and we were talking a little bit about applying, my particular gene keys into activating my genius and my higher purpose, and kind of how it all works together. So let's start with that. What are the gene keys? And Tell us a little bit about your gene keys journey as a gene keys ambassador here in Australia.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Johnson. So to simplify what the Jinkies are, it's a system, an open system as a way of um, understanding who you are through consciousness. So in essence, when you open up one area of your life, it can interlink to other areas in your life to open up your potentials of who you can be, just pretty much based on your attitude. So the way I came about the Gene Keys was through mum. In fact, 6 years ago, I was with I was dating a girl at the time over in Sydney, where you were, Johnson, and through an email, my mom had sent me through these two books to recommend to me for me to read, and the Gene Keys sort of stood out, and I was like, okay, what's in this? And I felt this sort of energy and power behind it. So I ended up researching behind on the background, on the website, and it just sort of got me in. And then I quickly ordered the book online. So there's a book you can buy. And the day before I received it, the girl that I was dating decided to break up. And I said to her, look, if you could just wait and just hold on a second, all the answers are going to be coming through. So I was like, just hold the line here. But it went, eventually it happened. And when I received the book, I decided not to sort of rush into it. I felt there really were treasures hiding and hidden beneath them, and I wanted to just retake my time with it. And I was lying in bed either that very night or a few nights after that, and I started to hear this sort of inner voice say to me to say the word drop. I was like, okay, so I said the word drop out loud, and all of a sudden these sort of codes started coming off me, sort of like a wave of like binary codes of 0 and 1s. And I was like, okay, what's this? I said it again, the word drop, and again, this sort of wave of downloads started being released. And I was sort of realizing all of a sudden I was letting go of all the negativity that was coming into my life. And from that moment on, I received this sort of, I can't explain it to words, but this sort of tender, loving care that I was sort of cushioned by these pillows. And I just felt so sort of like protected. And I was in my room around these four walls. I just felt completely safe that nothing could harm me. And then for the next 10 days, I never had any thought of the breakup of any kind. I thought, okay, this just can't be faked. So I really felt this sort of in my cells, this sort of deeper inner certainty and trust.
That's interesting. You experienced that dropping off sensation as, I would kind of call it, surrender, and you experienced it as binary codes. Is that something visually you saw, or was that something you emotionally felt? That's very interesting.
It was the two. I felt it. I also could sort of see it
Mm,
subtly.
kind of like the Matrix.
Yeah, it was like Matrix.
Mm.
Literally, it was like the Matrix. And that's another aspect of the Gene Keys is there's a 64 matrix code where the number 64 can be seen in everything in life, to architecture, to 64-bit technology. to 64 codons that we see in our DNA. So that very thing led me on a journey where I thought, okay, let's see where this will take me. And I started receiving these sort of, again, these insights and confirmations to say that whatever I'd ask the universe, it would give me back an answer. And one of those things I asked was saying, should I try and see if this relationship that fell apart, should I try and bring it back to life again? And I received this instant answer just saying, seek an alternative route. And I was like,
was this the first time that you were receiving inner guidance through auditory means, where you were hearing responses, and how did you cope with that? Or was this something that you have had all along?
I think this was more an unfolding process as a confirmation where I actually had a system that I could use and dive deeper. So I had other experiences as well, but this was coming at a more deeper layer,
right,
than before. And that's what the Gene Keys does. It's sort of like you said, it's a surrendering. It was like an unfolding and a letting go, like the peeling of an onion. Right. And that's what I experienced as a feedback to what was going on in my surroundings.
And so I know the Gene Keys are based off of the Book of Changes, the I Ching, which is a classical Chinese text of divination. And so maybe, you were mentioning a little bit about the 64 codons of the DNA, and 64 in architecture, and we see it everywhere. Maybe can you talk a little bit about the significance of the 64, where it comes from, and how this magic number can help us shift as people?
Yeah, sure. So if you see the 64, like the 64 codons that we have in our DNA, the I Ching itself talks of 64 hexagrams or archetypes, which can be seen as expressions of consciousness. And the Gene Keys, like you mentioned, they came from that. So they was able to decode what the I Ching was saying, so that we could then understand what that sort of consciousness is in a container, as it were. So as our 64, anyone that you use in your life will then interlock and unfold in other areas of your life from other different Gene Keys and other different codes. So they would operate in terms of a frequency band. So a frequency band being you could see it as a spectrum of consciousness of different energies. So there could be a lower end of energy, which in the Gene Keys world we talk of as a shadow or a fear or a challenge in your life. And at the other layer, at the other end of the spectrum, you have what we term a siddhi, which is a Sanskrit term to mean like a divine essence. And then in between the two, and there's a bridge. So there's what we call the gift, and that's where you can live out your genius. So take, for example, you have the Gene Key 29, which is about commitment. So at the lower end, you have half-heartedness. So anything that you do half-heartedly, it will always then lead to like further dismay or misfortune in your life, because you're planting the very seed that will lend itself to that. But if you were to change that sort of way by fully giving your commitment and heart to whatever task that you're exploring, it would then lead to fortune. And at the higher end of that, you would have what is devotion, which is a stronger term of like almost dying to the very thing that will help you get to where you want to be. And that's more of a, we see yogis do that. They'll devote to their practice. No matter what, they'll just do it for 6 days of the week. So this very thing of Gene Keys can really help you unfold the different layers and remove the layers of your life if you can actually see the patterns that are driving you to either your shadows or your gifts.
Yeah, and this is interesting, as you talk about dying to become who you really are, who you're meant to become. I was actually just watching a TED Talk about, the stories that we tell ourselves to make us become even more afraid of dying or letting go, right? Metaphorically, we're not talking like physical death, though that can happen. And so we go through these periods of shedding and letting go of ideas of who we are, and that's very much a big part of shifting our consciousness. So, and you're also mentioning about shadows. So what are some of the shadows that you typically see in people that they need to shift in order to become more conscious, to be more in alignment with who they are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, let's take, for example, now what we're seeing in our situation in life, right? With this pandemic that's happening across the globe. In essence, what I see is it's actually a fear of death. You know, it's a fear of dying. It's a fear of the uncertainty. It's the fear of seeing what's going to happen, and that in itself is a collective shadow. And with the gene keys, it's about just understanding and knowing, rather than believing, that everything is safe, that fear is safe, that fear is there to be unlocked and there to be embraced. Then we can transform it.
Love what you just said, that fear is safe and that it's waiting to be unlocked. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, so the more you can actually open up your heart to what is happening inside of you, the more you allow the suffering to come into you, but at the same time you're allowing it to be transformed to help the collective awakening that's happening in this planet at this time. So what's happening, in what I'm seeing now, is that we are seeing the cracks in our systems, in every angle, in every way you put it. And it's for the very place that in those cracks, what we're actually seeing, or what I'm seeing, is that there's actually a flower happening in the pavement, in between the cracks of the pavement. So it's about, can we put those seeds of fortune, those seeds of commitment, to the change that we want to see on the outside. Now the key is more not so much about wanting to change the outside, but rather to embrace the shadows that are happening within you, and then that will be then manifest on the external. That's the key. So it's not about ignoring what's happening. So do take, have empathy for what's happening with those who are suffering and those who are really feeling the pain in this current turmoil. And at the other end of the stick, it's also saying, well, can we allow that to be where it is, and to offer them the support where it's needed, and also to give ourselves the comfort and support through self-parenting with love, because that's what's needed to how to overcome these shadows. Right? So the shadows of fear, the shadows of discomfort, the shadows of uncertainty, it's allowing them to take place, but then to guide yourself through love, through gentleness, through patience, and comfort, that will allow the transformation to take place. Because then you're dissolving the rough edges around you. You're dissolving the very places that are keeping you hardened and keeping you with your character armoring on. It's like, can you allow that just to let go of it and say, look, it's okay. Can we just trust in that? And so when you start doing that with that, then you can start looking for those bridges on the outside and build those communities and those groups that can help give you support as well.
Yeah, and it's great what you're talking about on a macro level of what's happening in the world, and helping everyone collectively move to a place of embodying more love and more freedom from all of the suffering that seems that we're experiencing, right? And now if someone were in pain, that's of course very hard to separate or detach from that particular reality, because they're in pain, and they're in the suffering. And so can you maybe perhaps relate something that has shifted in you personally, to maybe bring it more into context for people? Because I know, like, the gene keys, it's very contemplative, and there's a lot of knowledge and principles to digest and to understand about the gifts and the shadows and the essence parts of who you are, right? And so you have a reading, right? And you have very specific gene keys that have been assigned to you from birth. And so you kind of go through this chart that's very much like an astrological chart, and then there's these numbers, and then there's these meanings, and then you have someone like yourself who comes and deciphers the code. And then so here you have given someone the information. Now what do you do with the information so that you can go through the process of changing, of letting go?
Yeah, thanks, Johnson. Yeah, so with the gene keys, like you mentioned, there's a profile that you can download. That's on my website, Costa Global, and on genekeys.com. There is a book that you can buy that will offer you the 64 different gene keys. There's also a course that you can take. So it's called the Golden Path. So the first probably step would be to obviously download your free profile, receive a free reading. So receive a reading. I mean, I'm offering a free reading as well, but you go through a reading process, and then from that you can then take yourself onto a journey through a collective transformational program, which will go into your four main pillars, which will be like your life's work, your evolution, your radiance, and your purpose, which is the first sequence of the golden path. And that will be done through in a collective as a group, because what we do through that is allowing yourself to build the conditions and the environment to create the breakthroughs so that you can then live out your genius. So when you're going through it in a collective, you find it just happens on its own. You just find like, oh, there's an insight that I received from someone else giving it to me, because it's happening in a holographic field. So someone's saying something, it links into what you've had as a synchronicity, and it's like, okay, and then it's opening up another doorway for you.
Right.
So that's where I would recommend to where you can start, is with the profile, and then go on a course.
Yeah. Okay. Great. For anyone who's watching live right now, if you have any questions about the gene keys while we have Costa here, feel free to just type them in the comments below. I see that Krista has written that she loves using the gene keys with her husband since 2009, so that's pretty awesome. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to chime in here. So yeah, that's great. That's a really nice little outline on how that process works. So let's talk a little bit about higher purpose and genius, and what that exactly means. What is my genius? We were talking about that the other day a little bit with my chart. I'm trying to remember can't remember. My life's work was something about grace, number 22, right? Something like that. And I can't remember what the genius was, but but it was insightful then. And looking at the chart, actually looking at the transitions from the shadow to the
gift.
The gift, yeah.
City. Yeah, so I mean, so when you get your profile, you will see different numbers which will allocate to different parts of your life. So like I mentioned, if you are resonating to go on the journey, in the first part, you'll have your life's work, your evolution, your radiance, and your purpose. And any one of those spheres will open up a doorway to living out your genius and your purpose. In essence, it's a bit like a trick, because any of those spheres will unlock other areas so that you can then you can start living your genius. So for example, if you're starting off with your life's work, it's what you're here to do in your life, and through being of service to the greater whole. So at the end of the day, it's about allowing yourself to sit with the shadow that you're in, and then just changing your attitude by that. So in your case, Johnson, if it's for you, it's suffering. By allowing the suffering to go into that, then you're living yourself out by being of grace to others, by being considerate to yourself and then to others. And that's how you honor yourself. And that is in essence living out your purpose, because it's something that you attune to rather than something that you do.
Right, and that's what I liked about the gene keys, that it wasn't about, here are the archetypal profiles of, you're going to be an engineer, and you're going to be an architect, and you're going to be an actor, and you're going to, right? It's more about the themes that we experience and the qualities of being, versus this is what you must do. And that's really useful to understand more of the nuances of the qualities. Like, like for me, I think the purpose was purity. It's like, okay, so how do I bring more purity into everything that I do? And if I wanted to go down a different path, do something else, it would be the same thing, and taking the quality of purity and applying that to my work, right? So that was really cool.
Yeah, that's right. So it's really it's not a closed system, right? It's an open-ended system. So it's isomorphic in nature, meaning it's ever present. So whenever, like you said, there's like a theme. So it's the theme underlying everything. It's more the feeling that's underlying everything. So where can I find the areas of where there is suffering to bring about more grace? So you see, it's never fixated towards one aspect.
So now when you're coaching someone, do you then go through and you break down, like, in their life what's causing them suffering, and then work through that? Or how does that process work?
Well, it's not so much about giving them, you offer them the tools so they can play around with, and then the feedback will then come about through their own experiences in life. So I mean, you can provide them with tasks and everything and different techniques, but simply put is the main sort of one giveaway would be just to allow yourself to pause in any area of your life, whether it be going for a walk, taking a breath, doing something different that breaks your routine.
Yeah.
And that in itself creates the conditions to bring about a breakthrough.
Yeah.
You see, even a breakdown is also an opportunity for a change. So this situation that we're going in right now is for the same very reason. It's an opportunity for change. It's an opportunity to go within. You know, I mean, I think the word, I don't know the right word for in the Japanese, but the word crisis also means opportunity.
Yeah.
So if you can use that and say, well, look, that's a great thing. That's a way of pausing. It's a way of going into the cracks, going into those spaces, and being the change that you want to be.
Yeah. And I would argue that a breakdown and a breakthrough are kind of the same thing. It
That's
just
right.
depends on it just depends on which side you're standing on it. Are you looking at it, you know, is that glass is half empty or is it half full? It's all about perspective, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, let's talk a little bit also about Gene Keys and how that deepens your relationship to yourself, as you know you have experienced through the downloads and the letting go and of clinging on to old relationships, things that perhaps don't work, you know, because I think also there we have to kind of address the divine nature of consciousness in order to accept a system like Gene Keys, right? We can't, if we're not someone that subscribes to a bigger picture out there or to source consciousness, it doesn't work, right? So Gene Keys kind of, you have to meet it at a certain level of consciousness in order to use it, right? Otherwise it doesn't work, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So in order to meet it, it's also about, again, meeting the fear, and embracing the fear, and that comes about through allowing it. So when we're looking at it in terms of relationships, that's really the crux of the Gene Keys. It's how can you allow yourself to remain open-hearted in the most challenging of times, or if you're going through, let's say, an argument with your partner, and then how can you remain yourself to be conscious and open without falling into the trap of going through that never-ending cycle of reaction and then repeating those same patterns over and over again. So the key is, again, is pausing, in essence. So you use your very relationships to help bring about the changes that are inside of you through softness, through, you know, bringing kindness to yourself and parenting yourself with love. That really is how you do it. So you keep seeing the same thing happen over and over again. But as you go through the journey with your Gene Keys, so the Gene Keys itself is very rhythmical, and it just says the same thing in different patterns as a nuance of the same thing. So that's how it works. The Gene Keys is really all about patterns that you keep seeing over and over and over again. And then the key is, how can I shift that pattern to bring about the change? And in essence, it's really about your attitude. If we were to bring it down, it's just really about shifting your attitude. Because if you see your attitude as what you're seeing on the outside, it also happens on the inside as well, through your environment. So if something is being negative on the outside, let's say through your partner, you say, well, what can I do to help change that? Like, what is the key for me seeing them for who they are without me having the pattern of saying, well, there's some sort of tension that I need to break down?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, the first reaction that most people will go to is like, how do I change them? Because they're not accepting the shadow that their partner is reflecting in themselves.
Well, that's exactly it. Because that then falls back into a victim state, right? Because you're either looking to be accusing them through blame, or just saying that I want to take responsibility. So when it comes to the Gene Keys, like you mentioned about having a higher set of consciousness, it's really about, can I be responsible for all emotions and feelings I'm going through to bring a transformation about?
Yeah.
That's the key.
So feeling into everything.
Feeling into everything deeply. Yeah. But it starts lightly by just giving yourself the pause.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and then you allow it to, and let's say if you fall off the tracks, it's fine. The key is like, well, can I bring myself back into the line and say, can I forgive myself what happens?
Yeah.
That's the important thing. That's why it's also very important to approach things with softness.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that you would like to share about the gene keys that you haven't shared about?
Um, well, there is, so on YouTube there is a Gene Keys channel that's from the founder Richard Rudd, and he offers many different techniques and ways of just showing what the Gene Keys can bring about to help trust in what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's nothing you need to do. It's just about just trusting and allowing what's going to happen, and through acceptance. Because the more you can accept something via surrender, that's how transformation happens.
Yeah, and that's so radically different from, the paradigm that everyone is subscribed to nowadays, right? So trust and surrender. It's like, what? You mean don't like put up a wall and fight? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know. We see that on the outside, but no, it's really about whatever is happening, it doesn't really matter, because it's about bringing in the inner trust within.
Yeah.
Because when you trust yourself within, then you see the change on the outside.
Yeah, and that is a beautiful principle to live by. It's very Eastern in origin, right? It has, and also has flavors of being very modern, and that's what's really cool about the Gene Keys, is that it comes from um, ancient Eastern wisdom, from the I Ching, and it connects through the science of numbers and of synchronicity, and then also a little bit of astrology. So you have science and spirituality and consciousness all meeting together through this system of Gene Keys, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, if you want to find out more about your unique Gene Keys chart, because everyone has their own chart, and there's a bunch of numbers on it with all these words on it, with different essences and gifts and things to discover about yourself and different pathways. And it's a pretty cool system. So if you want to learn more and you want to get your own unique Gene Key reading from Kosta, please reach out to him. There is a link on this feed for Kosta.global. That's www.kosta.global. And yeah, awesome. Thank you
Awesome.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and for talking about the Gene Keys with me.
Pleasure. Thank you.